What's up YouTube, it's your old school expert, and today I'm going to be profiling a goat control deck. I've not built or profiled a goat control deck in a very long time. This one's a little more advanced probably than the last time I built a control deck. So let's get right into it. This deck is really fun. It gives you a lot of options, and apologize if I sound sick. I'm currently getting over a cold. So we're going to start with BLS. That's obviously in any control deck, any chaos deck. This is just a massive card. It's insanely good. You really can't not run it. And because of that, you run lights and darks. So here we've got two magical merchants. So this card is a really nice metamorphosis target. And of course it's a light monster for BLS. So two of those, and this you really don't mind getting turn one, whereas the next card you kind of don't want it turn one. Not always you don't want it, but sometimes getting Magician of Faith turn one is just not very fun. So two Magician of Faith, there are not three in here. Some decks run three, but I don't like three because you're almost guaranteed to open with it. And especially if you open with two of them and not many good spells, you're kind of just stuck for a little while. So I run two, you could run three, but I think it's more of just a preference thing. So next light monster is DD Warrior Lady. This card is extremely versatile. It gets over a lot of problem monsters, does a lot of work. So I love that card. Next you got Asura Priest. So this card I'm not crazy fond of generally, but in this deck it really works. And I'll explain a little bit later why, but it's great against the mirror match, clearing out scapegoats. It's also amazing against any kind of recruiters that you run into, like giant rats or Mystic Tomatoes or Shining Angels or anything like that. It's just gonna clear them out. So it's actually a super good card in the right situations. And then the last light monster is a Zaborg. This card's like, it's starting to see a lot more play and I love it. I wish I had run it earlier. I just never really thought about it. Its effect is so good. It does kind of suck when there's no monster on the field to target because it would have to target itself. So basically you can't summon it unless you want to destroy it. But other than that, this is an answer to a lot of problems. And then basically you could turn a scapegoat into, with Metamorphosis, into a Thousand Eyes Restrict, take their monster, and if they have another monster, sack the Restrict for this and pop the other monster. And then you got a 2400 beater. So that's a really, really fun card to run. Just one of those. And then getting into the darks, so there's a Breaker. This is pretty standard. It's in every deck. It's too good. You got Sangan, the ultimate floater. And this card's really nice, especially like turn one, turn two. You can even set it as like, if you like already have Sinister in your hand, because that's usually your main target with this, then you can just set this and let your opponent knock it, and then they're not knocking your Magician of Faith later on. One Kaiku, because Kaiku is the anti-chaos hero. So, and I just like having a little bit of beef in here. But yeah, its effect is great to both remove your opponent's light and dark monsters, and then also, obviously, they cannot remove monsters themselves to summon their BLS or their Chaos Sorcerer. One card I'm not 100% on, but I do enjoy it occasionally, is Spirit Reaper. This card is great for stall, gives you a lot of time, but against Chaos decks, not the best because they just summon Chaos Sorcerer and pop it real quick. So it's really good against Warrior because unless they have Sasuke Samurai, they don't really have a great answer to this. But against Chaos, it's not the greatest. This too, also Tsukiyomi. So two of these also not great against Chaos because they run a lot of face down, so you don't really want to be flipping their Magician of Faith or their Dacoichi or anything face down, but it's actually really good offensively. Plus we run, 4 flip effects that that when reused are amazing. And then of course this is a control deck, so you've got Thousand Eyes Restrict. When you pair this with Thousand Eyes Restrict, you can really control the pace of the game and kind of keep your opponent from setting good flip effects. So that's why there's 2 of them in here. And then that is it for light and dark. So next we're going to go to Sinister Serpent. That's pretty standard. I mean, there's not really much to say. It's a great card. It's also a Metamorphosis target at level 1. Tribe Infecting Virus, just an answer to just about everything that's face up. And then Injection Fairy Lily. So this is kind of the one of card that's just kind of off. It's not light or dark, but this is a great answer to a ton of annoying stuff, especially Chaos Sorcerer and BLS. this just runs right through them like a hot knife through butter. So that is super fun to use. And I'll explain a little bit later when I show you the traps why I really enjoy this. So moving on, we're gonna go to the spells. We got the Trinity, as they call it: Pot, Graceful, and Delinquent. You could probably get away without Delinquent, but Pot and Graceful, it wouldn't make any sense to not run these. And then Snatch, Steal, that's like the fourth of the Trinity. MST, which I'm not, well, I guess I liked MST. Maybe I'm not crazy about Heavy Storm in this deck. Again, I'll show you why later on, but it does just help get rid of a lot of crappy stuff. Tuno I'm gonna cross out because you just, every time you run a Chaos, this is your best friend. Even in a mirror match, this is excellent. So really just against Warriors and Reasoning Gate are like the two decks you really wouldn't want these against. Side them out. All right, next we got 3 Scapegoats. So I'm actually looking for another Retro Pack 1 Scapegoat. So if you know anybody who's selling one, hit me up on the Insta, because right now I got this super sweet SDJ version in here. But I would like a third one to match the other two. So yeah, let me know if you have one. So Scapegoat is incredible. I used to think 3 was clunky, but the way this deck is built, it's actually perfect because you have just so many targets for so many things. So you've got targets for Metamorphosis, and then another card I'm going to show you here in a second. So before I show you that card, we're going to get to the Metamorphosis. Obviously, you run 3 in this one. Again, normally you could say 3 might be a little clunky and 2 would be better. But with 3 Scapegoats and then a bunch of level 1 monsters, you can almost always use this. It's almost never dead in your hand. Plus, like if you Snatch Steal your opponent's whatever, or you've got a Zabor, you can meta that into a Balter or something like that. So extremely useful card in this deck. So here's the MVP kind of this deck, the Unsung Hero, Creature Swap. This card is badass. It's so fun. It's actually, I like using it earlier rather than later, because later, yeah, you can maybe creature swap like a big monster, but if you use it early, you really disrupt your opponent. And this deck is all about disruption. So that's a really disruptive card. You've got Scapegoats all the time, so you could just swap a token. You could put one in attack mode, swap a token, and then hit it with Injection Fairy Lily. I mean, there's a lot of options here. So this is a great, great card. You could steal their face down stuff, especially if you're pretty sure it's a Magician of Faith or another good flip effect that you don't want them to get. Hit them with a creature swap. Next we have Book of Moon. I'm thinking about putting another one of these in here because this card, every time I use it, it's really, really good. It's always like getting me out of a jam or something. So right now it's just at 1 because it doesn't really plus, but I don't know, it just puts you in situations that make your board better than what it was. So that's what this deck's all about. And then the last spell is Swords of Revealing Light. This is great stall. Like this, because no one ever MSTs this or Heavy Storms this or hits it with like a Raigeki Break or anything, because they're like, well, in 3 turns it's going to go away on its own anyway, so why waste resources getting rid of this unless they're really pushing for like a heavy attack. So this card is amazing because it usually sits there for 3 turns and gives you plenty of time to set up, maybe get some kind of a card advantage, use your Tsukiyomis, that kind of thing. Really nice card. So I thoroughly enjoyed this Swords. So we'll go into the traps. There's only a few. We got Mirror Force. Obviously this is a great card, but it's almost like a decoy in this deck as a means to just like, I'll set it, and if I can use it, I'll use it pretty quickly because again, I like to be disruptive. I'm not trying to wait for like this big hit. Timing is important, but so is being disruptive and doing things your opponent doesn't expect. So I love using this early. Plus, if they like MST it, no problem, because I would rather they MST this than some of the stuff later on. So Ring of Destruction, kind of similar, especially if there's a face-up target for this. I always set it, because then if they MST it or whatever, then you can chain it. And then the reason I would rather them MST this or this rather than the other traps is because I'm running 3 Royal Decree, because this deck doesn't run a lot of traps, and a lot of decks in the meta right now are trap heavy. Not all of them, but several of them are. So obviously you side these out when you're playing a deck that's similar to this, or just a deck that's not really running any traps. You obviously side this out, but in game 1 against a deck that is trap heavy like Warriors or a lot of Chaos these days, This card is incredible. This saves your ass so many times. And it's so nice because it's one resource. It's one card that shuts down all their back row. It's so useful, especially when like Chaos, when they're running their, Raigeki Breaks or their Phoenix Wing Wind Blast. It just shuts all that down completely. So it's a great card. And then of course you can still use Scapegoat as a defensive mechanism, as a quick play to protect yourself when this is face up, as well as Book of Moons. So that's why I like running those cards so much. So let's look at the side deck. Side deck is very debatable. I feel like side decks are always debatable. They depend on what's in the current meta, what you expect to go up against, that kind of stuff. So I start with 3 Trap Dust Shoot. So the reason there's 3 is I don't side this a lot, but if I'm, especially in game 2, and if I know I'm going first, I'm gonna wanna draw this because it's incredible on turn 1. But especially when I'm facing a deck that doesn't have a lot of traps, side these out like 1-for-1 swap, 3-for-3, I guess, on the Royal Decrees to the Trap Dust Shoot is fantastic. It's because it's a very useful card against almost any deck. Whereas this, if you're playing a deck with no traps, it's pretty useless. So that's what the Dust Shoots are mainly used for. One Lightning Vortex is just really good against aggro stuff or decks that just have big monsters. Or in the mirror match if you're trying to get rid of Scapegoats, because that's very, very good for getting rid of Scapegoat. 2 Mystic Walk for burn, that's pretty self-explanatory. That's just your burn protection. 1 more Book of Moon, because like I said, it's so good. So good in this deck. I almost want to main a second one. I just don't know what I would take out. 1 Reinforcement of the Army, and I'll show you why in a second. Because if you're siding that in, you're also siding in, most likely, your Exiled Force and your Mystic Swordsman level 2. So against Chaos, I will often put in a Mystic Swordsman level 2. They don't expect that. They don't see it. You don't see it a lot because it's an Earth. So outside of Warriors, you don't see this a whole lot. But this card does so much fucking work against Chaos. It's insane, especially with a Royal Decree up. And you're just jabbing away at their face down. Man, that is the best feeling. So this card is fantastic against Chaos. I'd rather this than like, Mind Control or something like that. We got 1 Mobius. I could put another one in here, just because it's just great back row hate. But the thing is, like, I'm already running a lot of back row hate, so I mean, I could even take this out. I don't know. It's let me know what you guys think. 1 King Tiger. I wouldn't run 2 only because, well, it's an Earth, but it's also like a bunch of my monsters would be affected by this, or some of them at least, because there's like Injection Fairy Lily and stuff like that. But this is, it's an incredible card against Panda Burn especially, and it's not bad against Chaos too, although they set a lot of their lower attacking monsters. Then we got an Asura Priest, just 1 more. It's actually really good again against Chaos because like sometimes they'll set up they'll have a bunch of like defensive monsters, and then you could just go in and kind of wipe the board. And then last, but definitely not least, 2 Karibos, because this deck is really vulnerable to the more aggressive decks, especially Reasoning Gate, because they kind of OTK. And this deck is not aggressive, so I'm not constantly putting pressure on my opponent, and at least not in that way, where I'm pressuring, 2,000 attackers all the time and just taking chunks of life points, forcing them to set up their OTK. This deck doesn't do that. So if I side this in against Reasoning Gate, it is fucking fantastic because they never expect it. And yeah, it only negates 1 monster, but often that's all you need to survive the turn, because it's hard for them to do 8,000 damage in 1 turn. So as long as you can negate at least 1, you then have another turn, and they've exhausted, usually at that point, once they're going for game, their board is huge. Like they've got like 3 or 4 big monsters, but they've exhausted all their resources to do that. So you throw one of these down, and then they have to end turn after they attack with their other monsters. You've got enough life points to survive. Next turn, you've got a bunch of stuff in your hand, most likely, because they've probably true-nated and like blah, 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 blah. So it puts you in a really good position to counter, especially with like a Thousand Eyes Restrict. So let's look at the side real quick. The main stuff, I'm not gonna go over everything. sorry, not the side, the fusion deck, I guess is what it was called back then. So 3,000 as are strict, that's pretty standard. 2 Balters, because we're running Zabord, so level 5. And Balter is the best level 5, I think. Level 6 is that and that. This is really good. This really isn't that good. It's just kind of in there just because. This is really good against traps. Level 8 for BLS, if you want to use that. You could combo into BLS. This is level 7, so maybe if I snatch steal something, and then another level 5, and then level 5. So that's the deck. Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching, and as always, stay tuned for more awesome Yu-Gi-Oh videos.